Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another relaxing journey through history. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight, or whenever you're listening to this. Whether you're winding down for bed, taking a peaceful break from your day, or just looking for something interesting to listen to while you relax, you've come to the right place. Tonight, we're going to explore something absolutely fascinating. We're going to step back in time to one of the most powerful and feared empires in human history, the Mongol Empire. We'll discover why you probably wouldn't survive even a single day in this harsh but incredible world. We'll meet different people from all walks of life, from nomadic herders to conquered farmers, from skilled craftsmen to palace servants. We'll explore their daily routines, their struggles, their food, their homes, and their fascinating way of life. Feel free to say hi in the comments. Let me know what time you're watching this and where you're tuning in from. I love seeing where everyone's listening from around the world. So get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's travel together back to the 13th century, to the vast steppes of Mongolia and beyond, where the sound of hoofbeats on grass meant either opportunity or doom, depending on which side of the empire you found yourself on. Our story begins on a crisp morning in the year 1240. The sun rises slowly over the endless grasslands, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. The air is thin and cold, carrying the scent of horses and smoke from countless campfires. This is the heart of the Mongol Empire, and for most people living here, survival is never guaranteed. Let's start with Batbao, a young Mongol herder who's been living on the steppes his entire life. He wakes before dawn in his family's jur, a circular felt tent that can be packed up and moved in less than an hour. The inside of the jur is surprisingly warm, heated by a central fire pit and insulated by thick layers of felt made from sheep's wool. Batbao sleeps on a simple mat covered by heavy furs that smell of smoke and animal oils. As Batbayar opens his eyes, he can hear his father already moving around outside, checking on their horses. In Mongol culture, horses aren't just transportation, they're life itself. A family's wealth, status, and survival all depend on their horses. Batbayar's family owns 43 horses, which makes them reasonably well off but not wealthy. Batbayar pulls on his deal, a long robe made of thick wool that reaches almost to his knees. Over this, he wraps a wide sash around his waist and pulls on his boots, which are made of soft leather and felt. The boots have pointed toes that curl upward, designed to fit perfectly into stirrups for long hours of riding. His breakfast is simple but filling. His mother Oyuna serves him a bowl of mare's milk that has been fermented into a mildly alcoholic drink called uragra. The taste is sour and slightly fizzy, nothing like the milk you might be used to. Along with this, he eats some dried mutton that's been preserved with salt and a handful of dried cheese curds that are so hard they have to be sucked on slowly until they soften. After breakfast, Batbayar heads outside to help his father round up the horses. The morning air hits his face like a slap, probably around -10 degrees Fahrenheit. His breath forms thick clouds in the air, and his fingers quickly become numb despite his thick gloves. This is spring weather on the steppes. Winter temperatures can drop to -40 degrees or lower. His father Temujin points toward a group of horses that have wandered about a mile away during the night. Batbayar mounts his favorite horse, a sturdy mare named Saikon, and gallops across the grassland to bring the stragglers back. The grass beneath his horse's hooves is short and brown, still dormant from winter. In a few weeks, it will turn green and provide excellent grazing, but right now, the horses have to work hard to find enough to eat. As Batbayar rides, he scans the horizon constantly. This is habit drilled into him since childhood. On the steppes, danger can appear from any direction, at any time. Raiders from other tribes, wolves, sudden storms, or simply getting lost can all be fatal. The landscape stretches endlessly in every direction, with no trees, no mountains, no landmarks except for the occasional pile of stones called an ovo. After gathering the horses, Batbayar helps his father check each animal for injuries or illness. They run their hands along the horse's legs, looking for swelling or cuts. They check hooves for stones or cracks. They examine eyes and noses for signs of disease. A sick horse isn't just an economic loss. It could mean the difference between life and death if the family needs to move quickly. Around midday, Bat Bayar's sister Altan Setseg returns from visiting a neighboring family about 5 miles away. She brings news that a group of Chinese merchants has been spotted 2 days' ride to the south, traveling with a caravan of goods. This is exciting news. The Mongols depend on trade for many essential items they can't produce themselves, including metal tools, silk cloth, tea, and grain. Bat Bayar's father decides to take several horses to trade with the merchants. This means a dangerous journey across open steppes, but the potential rewards are worth the risk. Before they leave, Oyuna packs travel food for them. She fills leather bags with dried meat, dried cheese, and dried mare's milk that has been formed into small cakes. She also gives them several sheep's stomach bags filled with water, since finding clean water on the steppes can be challenging. As they prepare to leave, Bat Bayar straps on his weapons. Even though he's only 16, he carries a compound bow made of horn, wood, and sinew, along with a quiver containing 40 arrows. He also has a curved sword called a scimitar, and a long knife for everyday tasks. Every Mongol male over the age of 14 is expected to be ready for combat at any moment. The journey to find the merchants takes them across terrain that would challenge even experienced hikers today. They ride for hours without seeing another human being, navigating by the position of the sun and their intimate knowledge of the landscape. The horses' hooves drum steadily against the hard earth, creating a rhythmic sound that becomes almost hypnotic. Along the way, they stop at a small stream to water the horses and refill their water bags. The water is ice cold and crystal clear, flowing down from distant mountains. Bat Bayar cups his hands and drinks deeply, tasting the mineral-rich water that has a slightly metallic flavor. His father warns him not to drink too much at once, as the cold water can cause stomach cramps. As afternoon turns to evening, they spot smoke rising in the distance. This could be the merchant's campfire, or it could be raiders. Bat Bayar's father signals for them to approach carefully, staying low and keeping their horses quiet. They dismount about half a mile away and crawl up a small hill to observe the camp. Through the gathering dusk, they can see about 20 people around several campfires. There are camels loaded with goods, which confirms these are merchants rather than raiders. However, the merchants also have guards, tough-looking men with weapons who keep watch in all directions. Trading with strangers always involves risk, even when both parties want to conduct honest business. Bat Bayar's father decides to approach openly, showing they have no hostile intentions. They mount their horses and ride slowly toward the camp, calling out greetings in Mongolian and Chinese. The merchant's guards immediately point arrows at them, but the lead merchant, an elderly Chinese man named Master Chen, recognizes the peaceful approach and signals his guards to lower their weapons. The negotiations that follow are complex and take several hours. Master Chen speaks some Mongolian, and Bat Bayar's father knows a little Chinese, but most of the communication happens through gestures and showing actual goods. The merchants are interested in the Mongols' horses, especially the stronger mares that could be bred or used for heavy work. In exchange, Master Chen offers silk cloth, iron arrowheads, Chinese tea, and small bags of salt. Salt is particularly valuable on the steppes, since it's essential for preserving meat and maintaining health, but it has to be transported from distant locations. The nearest salt deposits are hundreds of miles away. The bargaining process is like a careful dance. Neither side wants to appear too eager, and both sides know that showing desperation could lead to unfavorable terms. Bat Bayar watches his father carefully examine each item offered, testing the quality of the silk by rubbing it between his fingers, checking the sharpness and balance of the arrowheads, and tasting the tea to make sure it hasn't been adulterated with cheaper leaves. Finally, they reach an agreement. Bat Bayar's father trades 2 young horses for a bolt of blue silk, 50 iron arrowheads, 5 pounds of tea, and 3 pounds of salt. It might not sound like much, but these goods will improve his family's life significantly. The silk can be made into clothing for special occasions. The arrowheads will make their hunting more effective. The tea provides both nutrition and medicine, and the salt will help them preserve meat for the long winter months. As night falls, the merchants invite Bat Bayar and his father to share their evening meal and sleep near their camp. This is both hospitality and mutual protection, since having more people around makes everyone safer from potential raiders or wild animals. The meal consists of rice boiled with dried vegetables and small pieces of mutton. For Bat Bayar, who rarely eats grains, the rice is an exotic treat, with a texture and flavor completely different from his usual diet of meat and dairy products. After dinner, Master Chen tells stories about his travels. He describes cities with buildings made of stone that reach toward the sky, markets filled with thousands of people buying and selling goods from across the known world, and rivers so wide that you can't see the other side. For Bat Bayar, who has never seen a permanent building or a group of more than a few hundred people, these stories seem almost magical. In return, Bat Bayar's father tells stories about life on the steppes. He describes the great migrations of animals across the grasslands, the techniques for training horses, and the complex relationships between different Mongol tribes. Master Chen listens with fascination, taking notes on small pieces of paper with a brush and ink. He's particularly interested in the Mongols' methods for preserving food and their knowledge of horse medicine. As they settle down to sleep under the vast star-filled sky, Bat Bayar reflects on the day's events. The successful trade will help his family survive the coming months, but tomorrow will bring new challenges. They still have to make the dangerous journey home, and there's always the possibility of encountering raiders or getting lost in a sudden storm. The next morning, Bat Bayar wakes to find frost covering his blankets and the ground around him. The temperature has dropped significantly during the night, and his breath forms thick clouds in the still air. His father is already awake, checking on their horses and preparing for the journey home. Master Chen and his caravan are also preparing to leave, but they're heading in a different direction, toward a distant city where they hope to sell their remaining goods. As they part ways, Master Chen gives Bat Bayar a small gift, a piece of jade carved into the shape of a horse. It's smooth and cool to the touch, with a deep green color that seems to glow in the morning light. The journey home takes most of the day, and by the time they reach their family's jur, the sun is setting behind them, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. Bat Bayar's mother and sister are relieved to see them return safely, and they're excited to see the goods they've brought back. But Bat Bayar's story is just one small part of the vast Mongol Empire. To truly understand why survival was so difficult, we need to explore other perspectives and other lives within this enormous territory. Let's travel now to a small farming village in northern China, recently conquered by Mongol forces. Here we meet Li Wei, a rice farmer who has lived his entire life in the same valley where his ancestors farmed for generations. The Mongol conquest has turned his world upside down in ways both subtle and dramatic. Li Wei wakes before dawn in his small house made of mud bricks and wooden beams. The house has only 2 rooms, one where his family sleeps and eats, and another where they store grain and tools. The floor is packed earth covered with woven mats, and the only furniture consists of a low wooden table and several storage chests. His family consists of his wife Mei Lin, their 2 young children, and his elderly mother. Since the Mongol conquest 6 months ago, they've also been hosting a Mongol overseer named Boraldai, who is responsible for ensuring that the village meets its tribute obligations to the new rulers. The tribute system is one of the harshest aspects of life under Mongol rule. Every village must provide a percentage of its harvest to the Mongol administration, along with young men for military service and craftsmen for special projects. The percentages are calculated based on the village's population and estimated productivity, but the Mongols' estimates are often unrealistically high. Li Wei's morning routine has changed significantly since the conquest. He still begins by checking his rice fields, which cover about 3 acres of carefully terraced land, fed by a complex irrigation system. However, now he must also report to Baroldai about the condition of the crops and any problems that might affect the harvest. Bodildai is not a cruel man, but he represents a completely different culture and way of life. He speaks very little Chinese, and Li Wei knows no Mongolian, so their communication is limited to basic gestures and a few shared words. This language barrier creates constant tension and misunderstanding. For breakfast, Li Wei's family eats rice porridge with pickled vegetables and occasionally a small piece of fish or pork. However, since the conquest, their diet has become more limited. A significant portion of their harvest now goes to tribute, leaving less for the family to eat. They've had to become creative about finding additional sources of food, gathering wild plants and catching small animals to supplement their reduced grain supply. Lai Wei's work in the rice paddies is back-breaking labor that requires constant attention to detail. The fields must be flooded at exactly the right time, weeded regularly, and protected from birds and insects. The work is done mostly by hand, using simple tools like wooden hoes and sickles with iron blades. The irrigation system that feeds his fields is a marvel of engineering that took generations to build and maintain. Water from a nearby river is diverted through a series of canals and gates that can be opened and closed to control the flow to different fields. However, since the conquest, maintaining this system has become more difficult because some of the skilled engineers were taken away for Mongol construction projects. Around midday, Lai Wei takes a break from fieldwork to check on his family's other activities. His wife Mei Lin spends her days caring for their small vegetable garden, tending to their chickens and single pig, and making cloth from hemp fibers. The chickens are particularly important because they provide eggs and occasional meat, but they also require constant protection from foxes and other predators. Mi Lin also has new responsibilities since the conquest. She must prepare extra food for Borildai, who has very different tastes from the local population. He prefers meat and dairy products, which are expensive and difficult to obtain in their agricultural community. She's learned to make a type of cheese from sheep's milk, and she tries to obtain mutton from neighboring villages when possible. The children, 8-year-old John and 5-year-old Xiao, spend their days helping with simple tasks like feeding chickens, collecting eggs, and weeding the vegetable garden. However, their childhood has been affected by the conquest in ways that will shape their entire lives. They're learning Mongolian words and customs, and they live with the knowledge that John may be taken for military service when he reaches the appropriate age. In the afternoon, Li Wei attends a village meeting called by the local Mongol administrator. These meetings happen regularly and serve multiple purposes. The administrator, a stern man named Subutai, uses them to announce new policies, collect tribute, and identify potential problems before they become serious. Today's meeting focuses on the upcoming harvest season. Subutai explains that the tribute requirements for this year will be higher than last year because the Mongol army is planning a major campaign and needs additional supplies. He also announces that 10 young men from the village will be selected for military service, including potentially Li Wei's neighbor's son, who is only 15 years old. The villagers listen to these announcements in silence, but Li Wei can see the fear and anger in their faces. The higher tribute means that some families will not have enough food to survive the winter. The military conscription means that families will lose their strongest workers during the crucial harvest season. After the meeting, Li Wei walks home slowly, thinking about his family's situation. The rice crop looks good this year, but even a good harvest might not be enough to meet both the tribute requirements and his family's needs. He's considering whether to hide some of the grain, but the penalties for underreporting production are severe. That evening, Li Wei's family gathers for dinner in their small main room, lit by a single oil lamp made from a hollowed gourd. The meal consists of rice, stir-fried vegetables from their garden, and a small amount of fish that Li Wei caught in the irrigation canal. Borildai joins them, as he does every evening, creating an awkward atmosphere where the family can't speak freely. Borildai tries to be friendly, sharing stories about his homeland and showing them small trinkets he carries. He gives little Xiao a carved wooden horse, similar to the jade horse that Batbayar received from Master Chen. Despite the language barrier and cultural differences, He seems to genuinely care about the family's welfare. After dinner, Li Wei's mother tells traditional stories to the children, but now these stories have new meaning. The old tales about brave heroes and wise emperors remind everyone of a time when their village was ruled by people who shared their culture and language. The stories provide comfort, but they also emphasize how much has changed. As the family prepares for sleep, Li Wei lies awake thinking about the future. His children will grow up in a world very different from the one he knew as a child. They'll need to learn new languages, adapt to new customs, and navigate a political system that they don't fully understand. The skills and knowledge that have been passed down through generations may no longer be enough to ensure survival. But survival in the Mongol Empire wasn't just about adapting to new rulers. It was also about dealing with the practical challenges of daily life in a world where technology was limited, medicine was primitive, and safety was never guaranteed. Let's visit now with Jamuka, a skilled metalworker living in Samarkand, one of the great trading cities along the Silk Road. Samarkand has been conquered and reconquered several times, and its population has learned to adapt to whoever happens to be in power at the moment. Jamuka works in the metalworkers' quarter of the city, a maze of narrow streets filled with the sound of hammering, the glow of forge fires, and the acrid smell of burning charcoal. His workshop is a single room with thick stone walls, a large forge in the center, and shelves lined with tools, raw materials, and finished products. His day begins before sunrise, when he lights the forge and begins heating iron to the proper temperature for working. The forge burns charcoal, which is expensive and must be transported from forested areas many miles away. Controlling the temperature requires skill and experience, since too little heat makes the metal impossible to work, while too much heat can ruin it completely. Jamuka specializes in making weapons and tools for both the local population and the Mongol administration. His current project is a set of arrowheads ordered by a Mongol officer. The arrowheads must be precisely shaped and balanced, with sharp points that can penetrate armor and sturdy tangs that won't break when the arrows are shot from powerful bows. The work is physically demanding and requires intense concentration. Jamuka holds the hot iron with long tongs, shaping it with careful hammer blows on an anvil. Each strike must be placed exactly right, with just the right amount of force. Too hard, and the metal will crack. Too soft, and it won't take the proper shape. The heat from the forge makes the workshop uncomfortably warm, even in winter. Jamuka wears a leather apron to protect his clothes from sparks, and thick gloves to protect his hands, but burns and cuts are inevitable hazards of his trade. His hands and arms are covered with small scars from years of working with hot metal and sharp tools. Around midday, Jamuka takes a break to eat lunch with his wife Gulnar and their young son Rustam. They live in a small apartment above the workshop, reached by a narrow staircase. The apartment has 3 rooms, which makes them relatively prosperous by the standards of the metalworkers' quarter. Lunch consists of bread, cheese, dried fruit, and tea. The bread is made from wheat flour and baked in communal ovens shared by several families. The cheese is made from goat's milk and has a strong, tangy flavor. The dried fruit includes apricots, grapes, and dates, all grown in oases scattered across the desert regions around the city. After lunch, Jamuka returns to work on the arrowheads, but he's interrupted by a visit from Yasuge, a Mongol tax collector. Yasuge is making his monthly rounds of the metalworkers' quarter, assessing the value of work being done and collecting taxes accordingly. The tax system in Mongol-controlled cities is complex and often arbitrary. Craftsmen pay taxes based on the estimated value of their production, but the estimates are made by officials who may not understand the actual costs and time involved in the work. Jamuka must show Yasuge his current projects and explain what he's charging for them. Yasuge examines the arrowheads carefully, testing their sharpness and balance. He's clearly knowledgeable about weapons, and he asks detailed questions about the materials and techniques being used. Finally, he calculates the tax based on his own assessment of the work's value, which is higher than what Jamuka thinks is fair. However, arguing with tax collectors is dangerous. especially for members of conquered populations. Jamuka pays the required amount without complaint, though it represents a significant portion of his monthly income. This is one of the harsh realities of life in the Mongol Empire. The conquerors extract wealth from the conquered populations to fund their continued expansion and administration. In the afternoon, Jamuka receives a visit from another craftsman, Mahmud, who works as a jeweler in a nearby shop. Mahmud brings news and gossip from other parts of the city, including rumors about Mongol military movements and changes in government policy. Mahmud reports that a large Mongol army passed through the city last week, heading west toward Europe. The army requisitioned supplies from local merchants and craftsmen, including metalwork, leather goods, and preserved food. This kind of requisition is different from regular taxation because it's supposedly temporary and payment is promised for the future, but everyone knows that the promised payments rarely materialize. The conversation between Jamuka and Mahmud takes place in Persian, which serves as a common language in the city, despite the presence of many different ethnic groups. Both men also speak some Arabic and Turkic languages, and they're trying to learn Mongolian words that might be useful in dealing with the new rulers. As evening approaches, Jamuka finishes the last of the arrowheads and banks the fire in his forge. Banking the fire means covering the coals with ash, so they'll smolder overnight without going out completely. This saves fuel and time the next morning, since it's much easier to restart a banked fire than to build a new one from scratch. Upstairs, Gulnar is preparing dinner with ingredients purchased from the city's central market. The market is one of the wonders of Samarkand, a vast covered area where merchants from across Asia gather to buy and sell goods. You can find silk from China, spices from India, furs from the northern forests, and precious stones from distant mountains. However, the market has changed since the Mongol conquest. Some traditional trade routes have been disrupted by warfare, while others have become safer under Mongol protection. New goods are appearing, brought by Mongol merchants and administrators, while some familiar items have become scarce or expensive. Dinner consists of pilaf made with rice, lamb, and vegetables, served with yogurt and fresh bread. The lamb is expensive, but Jamuka's family can afford it occasionally because his metalworking skills are in demand. The rice comes from distant agricultural regions and must be transported across hundreds of miles of dangerous territory. After dinner, the family sits together in their main room, lit by oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Gulnar works on embroidering a silk cloth, while Jamuka repairs tools, and Rustam plays with small wooden toys. These quiet evening hours provide a brief respite from the stresses and dangers of daily life. But even these peaceful moments are affected by the realities of living in the Mongol Empire. The family must be careful about what they say, since other residents of the building might report suspicious conversations to the authorities. They must also be prepared for sudden changes in policy or unexpected demands from the government. Before going to sleep, Jamuka steps out onto the flat roof of his building to check the weather and observe the city around him. From the roof, he can see the lights of hundreds of other buildings, the glow of forge fires from other workshops, and the distant walls that surround the city. The walls of Samarkand are massive structures built of stone and brick, with watchtowers and gates that can be sealed in case of attack. However, everyone knows that these walls provided little protection when the Mongols first arrived. The city's previous rulers surrendered quickly, rather than face a siege that would have destroyed much of the population and infrastructure. As Jamuka prepares for sleep, he thinks about the future of his family and his craft. The demand for metalwork remains strong under Mongol rule, but the political situation is always uncertain. New conquests could bring changes in policy, taxation, or trade relationships that might affect his livelihood. His son Rustam is now 7 years old, and Jamuka is beginning to teach him the basics of metalworking. However, he also encourages the boy to learn languages and other skills that might be useful in the changing world of the Mongol Empire. Adaptability and flexibility are becoming more important than traditional knowledge and established relationships. Now let's shift our perspective once more to understand the experiences of people at the very bottom of the social hierarchy in the Mongol Empire. Meet Oyun Bileg, a young woman who was captured during a raid on her village and now works as a servant in the household of a Mongol noble family. Oyun Bileg's day begins before dawn, in the servants' quarters of a large Gur compound belonging to Borte, the wife of a high-ranking Mongol commander. The compound consists of several large gurk arranged around a central area, along with storage buildings, animal pens, and workshops for various crafts. Oyun Beleg sleeps on a simple mat in a small tent shared with 3 other female servants. The tent is cold and drafty, with minimal protection from the harsh weather of the steppes. She wakes to the sound of wind whistling through gaps in the felt walls and the distant sounds of horses and cattle being tended by other servants. Her first task each morning is to help prepare breakfast for the noble family and their guests. This involves milking mares and goats, churning butter, and preparing various types of fermented dairy products that form the basis of the Mongol diet. The work must be done quickly and efficiently, since the family expects their meals to be ready at specific times. The kitchen area is located in one of the larger gurgs, equipped with multiple fire pits, storage containers, and cooking utensils. Otenbileg works alongside other servants, including both captured people like herself and Mongols from lower status families who serve the nobility in exchange for protection and support. Breakfast preparation involves heating mare's milk to the proper temperature, adding fermentation cultures, and monitoring the process to ensure the right flavor and consistency. She also prepares dried meat by cutting it into small pieces and arranging it on wooden platters, and she churns butter using a traditional wooden churn that requires rhythmic up and down motions for about 30 minutes. While working, Oyun Beleg must be constantly aware of the hierarchy and protocols within the household. She must show proper respect to higher-ranking servants, avoid speaking unless spoken to, and anticipate the needs of the noble family without being specifically instructed. Mistakes or perceived disrespect can result in punishment ranging from reduced food rations to physical beatings. After breakfast is served, Oyunbileg's duties shift to cleaning and maintenance tasks. She sweeps the floors of the gurs using brushes made from bundled grass, empties and cleans chamber pots, and organizes storage areas. The work is physically demanding and must be done thoroughly, since Borte frequently inspects the living areas and punishes servants for any shortcomings. One of Oyunbeleg's most challenging responsibilities is caring for the noble family's extensive wardrobe. Mongol nobles own elaborate clothing made from silk fur and fine leather, often decorated with precious metals and gems. These garments require careful cleaning, repair, and storage to maintain their appearance and value. The cleaning process for fine clothing is complex and time-consuming. Silk garments must be brushed gently to remove dust and dirt, then aired in the sun to freshen them. Fur clothing requires different treatment, with careful combing to maintain the texture and appearance of the fur. Leather items must be treated with oils to keep them supple and prevent cracking. Around midday, Oyunbeleg is assigned to help serve lunch to a group of visiting Mongol officials who are discussing military and administrative matters with her master. This is both an opportunity and a danger for servants, since they might overhear important information, but they're also more visible to powerful people who might notice and punish any mistakes. The lunch consists of multiple courses served on wooden platters and bowls. The main dishes include roasted mutton, horse meat prepared in several different ways, and various dairy products. There are also some luxury items obtained through trade, including Chinese tea, dried fruits, and small amounts of rice prepared as a special delicacy. Oyunbeleg must serve the food while remaining as invisible as possible, refilling cups and platters without interrupting the conversation. The officials discuss military campaigns, tribute collection, and the administration of conquered territories. Some of the conversation is in Mongolian, which Oyunbeleg has learned to understand though she's not allowed to speak it, while other parts are in Chinese or Persian. From these conversations, she learns about the vast scope of the Mongol Empire and the challenges involved in governing such a diverse territory. The officials discuss problems with rebellions in distant provinces, difficulties in collecting tribute from agricultural regions, and the need for more administrators who can communicate with local populations. After lunch, Oyunbaleg is sent to help with laundry, one of the most labor-intensive tasks in the household. Water must be heated over fires, soap must be made from animal fats and ashes, and clothes must be scrubbed by hand using wooden boards. The process takes most of the afternoon and leaves her hands raw and chapped. The laundry area is located near a small stream that provides water for the compound. However, the water must be carried in heavy buckets, and during winter months, ice must be broken and melted before it can be used. The soap is harsh and caustic, made from lye derived from wood ashes mixed with animal fats. While working at the laundry, Oyunbileg has brief opportunities to talk with other servants, though these conversations must be conducted carefully to avoid attracting attention from supervisors. She learns news about other servants' families, rumors about changes in the household status, and occasionally receives messages from other captured people who are trying to maintain contact with their original communities. One of the other servants, a middle-aged woman named Toya, tells Oyun Buleg about her experiences serving in different Mongol households over the past 10 years. Toya explains the subtle signs that indicate whether a noble family is rising or falling in status, and she shares strategies for avoiding punishment and occasionally earning small rewards. According to Toya, the key to survival as a servant is to become indispensable while remaining unnoticed. Servants who develop valuable skills, such as cooking special dishes or maintaining complex equipment, are less likely to be sold or given away. However, servants who attract too much attention, either positive or negative, often find themselves in dangerous situations. In the evening, Oyun Baleg helps prepare and serve dinner, which is typically the most elaborate meal of the day. Tonight's dinner includes several guests, including a Chinese merchant and a Persian administrator, which means the meal must accommodate different cultural preferences and dietary restrictions. The dinner preparation requires coordination among multiple servants working on different dishes simultaneously. Oyunbileg is responsible for preparing vegetables and side dishes, while more experienced servants handle the main courses and expensive ingredients. The timing must be precise, so that all dishes are ready at the same time and served at the proper temperature. During dinner service, Oyunbileg observes the complex social dynamics among the guests. The Chinese merchant speaks through an interpreter and seems nervous about the business negotiations he's conducting. The Persian administrator is more comfortable with Mongol customs and participates actively in the conversation. The host family demonstrates their wealth and status through the quality and variety of the food they serve. After dinner, Oyunbileg's final tasks include cleaning the dining area, washing dishes and utensils, and preparing for the next day's meals. The dishwashing is done with hot water and sand, since soap is too valuable to use for this purpose. The utensils include wooden bowls and spoons, metal knives, and drinking cups made from horn or leather. Before going to sleep, Oyunbileg is allowed a brief period of personal time, which she usually spends mending her own clothes or writing letters in her mind to family members she may never see again. She's not allowed to have writing materials, and she's not sure if any of her family survived the raid that led to her capture, but composing mental letters helps her maintain a sense of connection to her previous life. As she lies on her mat in the servants' quarters, Oyunbileg listens to the sounds of the night. She can hear horses moving around in the corrals, the distant howling of wolves, and the quiet conversations of guards who patrol the compound. These sounds remind her that even in this wealthy household, safety is never guaranteed, and survival depends on constant vigilance. Her situation illustrates one of the harshest realities of life in the Mongol Empire. Warfare and conquest created vast numbers of displaced people who became servants, slaves, or refugees. These people had to adapt quickly to new cultures, languages, and social systems, often while dealing with trauma and grief from the loss of their original communities. But the Mongol Empire also created opportunities for some people to improve their situations through skill, luck, or strategic thinking. Let's meet Nasir al-Din, a young scholar and translator who has managed to find a valuable niche in the imperial administration. Nasir al-Din lives in Karakorum, the capital city of the Mongol Empire, where he works as a translator and scribe for the imperial bureaucracy. His small house is located in the Scholars' Quarter, a section of the city populated by educated people from various conquered territories who serve the Mongol administration in different capacities. His morning routine begins with prayers and meditation, followed by a simple breakfast of tea, bread, and dried fruit. Unlike the dairy-heavy diet of traditional Mongols or the rice-based meals of Chinese farmers, Nasir al-Din's food reflects his Persian heritage and his somewhat elevated status within the city's social hierarchy. Nasir al-Din's work involves translating documents between Mongolian, Persian, Arabic, and Chinese, as well as creating copies of important texts and maintaining records for various government departments. This work requires not only language skills, but also knowledge of different legal systems, cultural practices, and administrative procedures used throughout the empire. His workspace is a small room in a government building near the center of Karakorum. The room contains a low wooden desk, shelves lined with scrolls and books, and the tools of his trade including brushes, ink, paper, and seals used to authenticate documents. The work requires intense concentration and attention to detail, since errors in translation or copying can have serious consequences. One of his current projects involves translating a collection of Chinese agricultural manuals into Mongolian and Persian. The Mongol administrators want to improve food production in conquered territories, and they believe that sharing knowledge between different regions will help achieve this goal. However, the translation work is challenging because many technical terms don't have direct equivalents in other languages. Around midday, Nasir al-Din takes a break from translation work to attend a meeting with other scholars and administrators. Today's meeting focuses on developing a standardized writing system that could be used throughout the Mongol Empire. Currently, different regions use different scripts and languages for official business, which creates communication problems and administrative inefficiencies. The meeting takes place in a large room decorated with maps showing the extent of the Mongol Empire. The maps are works of art in themselves, hand-drawn on silk and showing mountains, rivers, cities, and trade routes across Asia and into Europe. Looking at these maps gives Nasir al-Din a sense of the enormous scope of the territory that the Mongols control. The scholars at the meeting represent different cultural and linguistic backgrounds. There's a Chinese Confucian scholar named Master Lu, a Tibetan Buddhist monk called Tenzin, an Arab mathematician named Ibn Rashid, and several others. Each brings different perspectives on writing systems, languages, and administrative practices. The discussion reveals the complexity of governing such a diverse empire. Master Lu advocates for adopting Chinese characters, which can represent concepts as well as sounds, and could potentially be used for multiple languages. Tenzin suggests incorporating elements from Tibetan script, which was developed specifically for translating Buddhist texts between different languages. Ibn Rashid argues for an Arabic-based system, pointing out that Arabic script is already used for trade and scholarship across much of the Islamic world. However, Nasir al-Din notes that Mongolian has sounds that don't exist in Arabic, Chinese, or Tibetan, which would make any borrowed writing system incomplete or inaccurate. The meeting continues for several hours without reaching a definitive conclusion, which is typical for such complex administrative challenges. The Mongol Empire's strength lies partly in its ability to incorporate and utilize different cultural traditions, but this same diversity creates ongoing challenges for standardization and communication. After the meeting, Nasir al-Din returns to his translation work, but he's interrupted by a visit from Jochi, a young Mongol official who needs help with a diplomatic correspondence. Jochi is intelligent and capable, but like many Mongols of his generation, he's more comfortable with spoken languages than with reading and writing. The correspondence involves negotiations with European kingdoms about trade agreements and territorial boundaries. The letters are written in Latin, which Nasir al-Din can read, but doesn't speak fluently. He must translate the letters into Mongolian, while also explaining the cultural and political context that might not be obvious from the text alone. This type of work demonstrates the crucial role that educated people from conquered territories play in the Mongol administration. The Mongols are excellent military strategists and administrators, but they depend on local experts for specialized knowledge about law, diplomacy, technology, and culture. As evening approaches, Nasir al-Din finishes his official work and spends time on personal projects. He's working on a comprehensive dictionary that would help people learn multiple languages spoken within the empire. This is partly for his own interest and education, but he also hopes it might be useful for other translators and administrators. His dictionary project involves collecting words and phrases from different languages, along with notes about pronunciation, grammar, and cultural context. For example, he's discovered that the Mongolian concept of loyalty to one's tribal leader doesn't translate directly into Chinese, Persian, or Arabic, each of which has different ideas about the relationship between rulers and subjects. Dinner for Nasir al-Din typically consists of foods from various parts of the empire, reflecting both his cosmopolitan tastes and his access to trade goods that pass through Karakorum. Tonight he eats Chinese noodles with Persian spices, accompanied by Mongolian cheese and Arab flatbread, all washed down with tea from different regions. This mixing of cuisines might seem natural to us today, but in the 13th century, it was quite unusual. Most people lived their entire lives eating foods produced within a few miles of their homes. The Mongol Empire's trade networks and cultural exchanges created new possibilities for people like Nasir al-Din, who lived in major cities and worked in international occupations. After dinner, Nasir al-Din often spends his evenings in conversation with other scholars, sharing news from different parts of the empire and discussing intellectual topics. Tonight he visits Ibn Rashid, who has been working on mathematical problems related to calculating tribute payments and military supplies. Their conversation covers a wide range of topics, from practical questions about converting between different measurement systems used in various parts of the empire, to philosophical discussions about the nature of knowledge and the relationship between different cultural traditions. Ibn Rashid shares news he's received from relatives in Baghdad about developments in Islamic scholarship and science. Nasir al-Din discusses his observations about how Mongol legal traditions are being adapted to govern settled agricultural populations. Both men are fascinated by the challenges and opportunities created by the empire's cultural diversity. However, their conversation also touches on the dangers and uncertainties of their situation. Scholars and administrators like themselves are valuable to the Mongol rulers, but their positions depend on remaining useful and avoiding political conflicts. Changes in imperial policy or shifts in the balance of power among different Mongol factions could quickly alter their circumstances. As Nasir al-Din walks home through the streets of Karakorum, he observes the remarkable diversity of people who have been drawn to the imperial capital. He passes Mongol warriors, Chinese merchants, Persian craftsmen, European traders, and many others, all pursuing their various businesses in the flickering light of oil lamps and torches. The city itself is a testament to the Mongol Empire's ability to bring together resources and people from across the known world. The buildings represent different architectural traditions. The food available in markets comes from distant regions, and the languages heard on the streets include dozens of different tongues. Before going to sleep, Nasir al-Din reflects on his unusual position within the empire. As a scholar and translator, he has opportunities and protections that most conquered people never receive. However, he also faces constant pressure to prove his value and navigate complex political relationships. His survival depends not just on his language skills, but on his ability to understand and adapt to the changing dynamics of imperial power. Now let's explore yet another perspective by meeting Kulan, a Mongol woman whose husband is away on a military campaign, leaving her to manage their household and livestock while dealing with the challenges of life on the steppes. Kulan lives with her two young children, her elderly mother-in-law, and several servants in a cluster of gurs about 50 miles from the nearest major settlement. Her husband Jelmay is a minor commander in a Mongol army that's currently campaigning in Eastern Europe, and he's been away for more than a year, with no definite date for his return. Her day begins before dawn, with the sounds of horses and sheep moving around outside the garkas. The animals must be checked and counted every morning, since rustlers and wild predators are constant threats. Kulan dresses quickly in her heavy wool deal and fur-lined boots, then steps outside into the cold morning air. The livestock includes about 60 horses, 200 sheep, 50 goats, and 20 cattle. These animals represent the family's wealth and their primary means of survival, providing food, clothing, transportation, and trade goods. Managing such a large herd requires constant attention and considerable skill, especially when the male head of household is absent. Kulan's first task is to check on the horses, which are the most valuable and most vulnerable part of the herd. Horses can travel long distances quickly, which makes them attractive to thieves, and they're also susceptible to diseases and injuries that can quickly reduce their value. She walks among the horses, looking for signs of illness, injury, or unusual behavior. One of the mares, Saikon, appears to be favoring her left front leg, possibly indicating a stone bruise or more serious injury. Kulan examines the hoof carefully, using techniques taught to her by her father and refined through years of experience. She finds a small stone wedged between the hoof wall and the sole, which she removes with a metal pick designed for this purpose. After treating Saikon's hoof, Kulan moves on to check the sheep and goats, which are kept in a separate area, surrounded by a portable fence made of wooden stakes and felt panels. The fence can be moved as needed to provide fresh grazing for the animals and to avoid overusing any particular area of grassland. The sheep are particularly important because they provide wool for making felt, which is essential for constructing and maintaining gurs. The wool must be sheared at the right time of year, cleaned and prepared properly, and then processed into felt using traditional techniques that have been passed down through generations of nomadic families. Kulan's mother-in-law Borte is an expert in felt making and other traditional crafts. Despite her advanced age, Borte continues to work actively in maintaining the household and teaching these essential skills to Kulan's children. This morning, Borte is working on repairing a section of their main jar where the felt covering has become thin and needs reinforcement. The repair work involves cutting new pieces of felt to the correct size and shape, then sewing them onto the existing structure using strong thread made from animal sinews. The stitching must be done carefully to ensure that the repairs are waterproof and will withstand the strong winds that frequently sweep across the steppes. Around midday, Kulan receives visitors, a family of traveling merchants who are heading toward a distant market town. The merchants, led by an experienced trader named Gonbold, are driving a small herd of camels loaded with goods for trade. They request permission to rest near Kulan's camp and to trade for fresh horses. Hospitality toward travelers is an important tradition among steppe nomads, but it also involves risks, especially for a household without adult male protection. Kulan must balance the cultural expectation of providing hospitality against the need to protect her family and property from potential threats. After careful consideration, she agrees to allow the merchants to camp near her carries for one night. In exchange, they provide news from other parts of the empire and offer some of their trade goods at favorable prices. The news includes reports about her husband's military unit, which is apparently healthy and successful in its current campaign. The merchants also bring disturbing news about raids by bandits who have been attacking isolated households and stealing livestock. These bandits are reportedly a mix of displaced people from conquered territories and deserters from various armies. They're particularly dangerous because they know both nomadic and settled warfare techniques. This news reinforces Kulan's concerns about her family's security. Without her husband present, she must rely on her servants and her own skills to protect the household. She owns weapons, including a composite bow and a curved sword, and she's trained in their use, but she knows that her small group would be vulnerable to a determined attack by a larger force. In the afternoon, Kulan works with her children on various educational activities. Her son Batu, who is 9 years old, practices riding and archery skills that will be essential for his future role as a Mongol man. Her daughter Asulu, who is 6, learns traditional women's skills including cooking, sewing, and animal care. The education provided to Mongol children is practical and focused on survival skills rather than abstract learning. Batu must learn to ride horses in all weather conditions, to shoot accurately with a bow while mounted, and to care for livestock. He also learns basic military tactics and strategies through games and storytelling. Asulu's education focuses on the skills she'll need to manage a nomadic household. She learns to milk animals, prepare traditional foods, make and repair clothing, and process raw materials like wool and leather into useful products. She also learns about medicinal plants and basic veterinary techniques for treating sick animals. Both children are learning multiple languages, since the ability to communicate with different groups is essential for trade and diplomacy. They speak Mongolian as their native language, but they're also learning Chinese, Persian, and Turkic words that they might need in various situations. As evening approaches, Kulan organizes the evening routine of bringing the animals back to the protected areas around the gurs. This is one of the most dangerous times of day, since predators often hunt at dusk, and rustlers might try to approach under cover of gathering darkness. The sheep and goats are brought into enclosures close to the gurs, where they can be watched throughout the night. The horses are hobbled or tied to prevent them from wandering too far, but they're left free enough to graze and move around. The cattle are kept in a separate area where they're less likely to attract wolves or other predators. Dinner preparation involves the entire household working together. Kulan's mother-in-law prepares the main dishes, including mutton stew and fermented mare's milk. Kulan makes bread using flour obtained from the visiting merchants, and her children help with simple tasks like gathering dried dung for fuel and setting up the eating area. The visiting merchants are invited to share the evening meal, which provides opportunities for everyone to exchange news, stories, and cultural knowledge. Ganbold tells stories about his travels to distant cities and describes the goods and customs he's encountered. In return, Kulan shares information about local conditions and recent events in their area. After dinner, the conversation continues around the fire, with people sharing songs, stories, and news from different parts of the empire. These informal gatherings serve important social and informational functions in nomadic society, helping to maintain connections between scattered communities and to spread important news across vast distances. However, the conversation also reminds everyone of the dangers and uncertainties they face. Ganbold describes cities that have been destroyed by warfare, trade routes that have become too dangerous to use, and families that have been separated by military campaigns or forced relocations. Before going to sleep, Kulan checks once more on the animals and posts one of her servants as a night guard. The guard will stay awake throughout the night, watching for signs of predators or human threats. This constant vigilance is exhausting, but it's necessary for survival in an environment where danger can appear at any time. As she lies in her jur listening to the sounds of the night, Kulan thinks about her husband and wonders when he might return. Military campaigns can last for years, and there's always the possibility that he might be killed or captured. If that happens, she'll need to find ways to protect her family and property, possibly by remarrying or by seeking protection from male relatives. These worries illustrate another harsh reality of life in the Mongol Empire. The constant warfare that made the empire possible also disrupted families and communities, leaving many people in vulnerable situations. Women like Kulan had to develop considerable skills and independence, but they still face significant disadvantages in a male-dominated society. The stories of Bat Bayar, Li Wei, Jaymuka, Oyun Balek, Nasir al-Din, and Kulan show us different aspects of life in the Mongol Empire, but they all share certain common challenges. Survival required adaptability, physical toughness, practical skills, and the ability to navigate complex social and political relationships. The empire's vast size and cultural diversity created both opportunities and dangers. People could potentially improve their situations through trade, military service, or specialized skills, but they also faced threats from warfare, disease, natural disasters, and political changes beyond their control. Food was often scarce and monotonous, medical care was primitive or non existent, and comfort was a luxury that few people could afford. Most people worked from dawn to dusk just to meet their basic needs, and they had little time or energy for leisure activities or personal pursuits. The climate was harsh in most parts of the empire, with extreme temperatures, violent storms, and long winters that tested human endurance. Shelter was basic and often inadequate, transportation was slow and dangerous, and communication across long distances was difficult and unreliable. Perhaps most challenging of all was the constant uncertainty about the future. Political changes, military campaigns, natural disasters, or personal misfortunes could quickly destroy years of careful planning and hard work. People had to be prepared to abandon their homes, change their occupations, or adapt to new rulers with little warning. Yet despite all these challenges, the people of the Mongol Empire found ways to survive, and sometimes to thrive. They developed remarkable skills in adapting to different environments and circumstances. They created networks of trade and communication that spanned continents. They preserved and transmitted knowledge across cultural boundaries. Their stories remind us that human beings are incredibly resilient and resourceful when faced with difficult circumstances. They also help us appreciate the relative safety, comfort, and stability that many of us enjoy today, things that would have seemed miraculous to someone living in the 13th century. As we conclude our journey through the Mongol Empire, it's worth remembering that these weren't just historical statistics or abstract concepts. These were real people with hopes, fears, dreams, and struggles much like our own. They loved their families, worried about their futures, and worked hard to create better lives for their children. Their world was harsh and unforgiving in ways that are difficult for us to imagine, but it was also filled with human courage, ingenuity, and determination. By understanding their experiences, we gain a deeper appreciation for both the progress that humanity has made and the fundamental challenges that people have always faced in their quest for survival and meaning. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of life in the Mongol Empire. I hope these stories have given you a new perspective on this fascinating period in history and perhaps a greater appreciation for the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. Until next time, sleep well and dream of the vast steppes and ancient cities where these remarkable people lived their extraordinary lives.